Growth on track.
Live special.
You can see through this spring statement how determined
Rachel Reeves,
this government is
Chancellor of England.
We set ourselves in the budget
welfare benefits.
last year, and to grow
Subject
our economy,
UK 25.
to sustainbly improve living standards.
If I thought the right side's green.
We need for our public services.
Tighten the motor distals down there and analog.
A last-minute change in order to save
27th of March.
£5 billion.
Thursday morning goes to 25.
Crackdown on tax avoidance could generate up to £1 billion, and there's an aim for a leaner, more agile state, trimming 15% from government running costs. The Chancellor did confirm there will be no new changes to tax.
You choose your headroom at the time you set your budget, which in her case was back in
last year in October 24.
And the amount that she set, which was about £10 billion against one of the fiscal targets, was completely evaporated, in fact, by today. In fact, she'd gone underwater by over £4 billion.
Blimey.
So she was a gambler.
Changes to tax and spend are now routinely assessed by the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility, the government's official forecaster. Because of these measures,
This is
the
dark
OBR
times,
has
guys.
now downgraded its UK
Dark
growth
times.
forecast from 2% to 1% this year. But it does then expect growth to pick up and be closer to 2% for the next 4 years.
The big risk I think the Chancellor has taken is that she's left herself with the same very, very small level of room for manoeuvre as she had back in October. It will only take some very small changes to forecasts to wipe that out. And in that world, she's going to have to come back for tax increases.
Meanwhile, bills like
That'll be
energy and
popular.
water are set to rise again next week. Council tax too. Here in Northampton, it's increasing by the maximum the government will allow in England, 5%.
For sure, it's getting harder. The more last year the rent was less, and this year it's getting upper. Same with the council tax. Everything is getting higher, so it's hard.
It's so unfair. Yeah. We're working so hard and we're having to pay so many bills. So many things are expensive, even food.
Strong opinions too on a tightening of welfare rules, which the government's own impact assessment admits could see around 3 million families lose out.
My poor son is worried about losing his flat because he's got an illness that he can't work, and is, devastated over it all.
There's been a lot more people who are not really
Tragedy.
working now. Get them working again, it would be good, wouldn't it, really? Because there's far too much being spent on that benefits, isn't there, really?
The global landscape continues to ebb and flow. Positive news could see the outlook improve, but further friction or unrest and all the Chancellor's hard work could be washed away. Mark Ashdown, BBC News, Northampton.
These are very, very
Let's speak to our chief
difficult
political
times.
correspondent, Henry Zeffman, joining us from
Chancellor of
Downing
England.
Street. Morning to you, Henry. So that global landscape, so many things knocking around, isn't there? The global landscape we were talking about there. Then there's people's real lives, what it feels like at the moment. And then there's your business, which is the business of politics and what her colleagues, even within the Labour Party, are saying.
That's right, Charlie, and all of those issues, domestic and global, feeding into a complicated political picture for Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, this morning. Let's start with the response within the Labour Party to those benefits cuts, or welfare reforms as the government usually calls them. There was real unease and in some quarters anger that extra welfare cuts beyond those from last week were announced yesterday, and you saw really quite organised opposition from Labour MPs on the left of the party towards the Chancellor yesterday. My sense, though, is that the opposition to those welfare reforms deepened, but it didn't widen. I didn't see new or surprising names who hadn't previously questioned the government's decisions there coming out. Then when it comes to the global landscape, I mean, we've seen from Donald Trump overnight that there could be really dicey moments for the UK economy, perhaps coming as soon as next week. There's certainly dicey negotiations for the Chancellor to come with her own colleagues in the spending review, which is coming up in June. So my sense is that that big debate over Rachel Reeves' approach to borrowing and tax has only been deferred. It hasn't been ended by her announcements yesterday.
Henry, thank you very much for
Fascinating.
saying 7:30 this morning. We'll be speaking to the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Also here in the ship,
Scratch and find jobs.
coming up at
On
8:40.
the right side screen.
Nina, so there's many references about global situations, specifically tariffs, and there's been a development overnight in relation to Trump and tariff announcements.
Yeah, President Trump playing into the global landscape in quite a big way. Yeah, President Trump has announced a 25% tariff on all foreign cars imported into the United States. It will affect nearly 1 in 5 vehicles exported from Britain and will come into force from next week. Mr. Trump said the move would create jobs in US manufacturing. Our correspondent Merlin Thomas reports from Washington.
There you go, guys.
Tariffs. One of President Trump's favourite words is back. This time targeting the automotive industry, in a move that could widen the trade war.
What we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff. We start off with a 2.5% base, which is what we were at, and we go to 25%.
President Trump claims the new tariffs will create industry growth in the US. But analysts say American consumers will likely bear the brunt. And countries around the world are bracing for what this could mean for them, including the UK. 18% of UK car exports go to the US. That's about £6.4 billion.
Didn't know that.
And last year, the US was the biggest sales market for the Jaguar Land Rover.
Wow.
Bigger than both the UK and China.
Blimey.
The British industry body, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, described the announcement as disappointing and urged the UK and US governments to come together immediately and strike a deal that works for all. And the news also triggered a response from Europe. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, said they'd consider the measures before any potential response. She said tariffs are taxes, bad for businesses, worse for consumers equally in the US and the European Union. These import taxes are set to kick in on Wednesday of next week.
Oh,
what are you doing? The so-called reciprocal tariffs are due to come into effect for individual countries based on their trading relationship with the US. President Trump's on-again, off-again tariff announcements have been a turbulent time for the US stock markets, which have taken a hit. The car industry is a global network, hinging on lots of different trade agreements. Experts say the ripple effects are likely to be felt across the world and widen the already raging trade war. Merlin Thomas, BBC News,
Please subscribe to my show and sign German. Sometimes video.
The Prime